Hi there, Chinwaggers. Paul Giamatti speaking. I'm here with...
Stephen Asma.
Correct. Thank you for joining us.
Correct. Thank you.
Correct.
I'm correct
Yeah,
on who I am.
Nice. A+. Yes,
I appreciate
indeed.
that, man.
Yes, indeed. Just confirming. I always feel like a little friendly affirmation is helpful, isn't it, Steve?
Thank you. I needed it.
Especially when it comes to one's identity. I always think that's useful. Thank you. We, as usual, we were, carrying on, palavering big time with no regard for the time. So we had a bonus wag with our amazing and esteemed investigative journalist, Leslie Kean. And here it is. Here's this bonus wag avec Leslie Kean. What is the manifestation of hands? Isn't there a sort of tradition of manifesting hands? And there's this sort of famous hands.
That's the most amazing thing I can describe it if you want.
Yeah, what happens? Please do.
It's happened throughout history too, which is what fascinated me.
And for some reason, I find that then this is, I don't know what this says about me, but if there's a kind of historical line to it, I buy it more. If it's something that people have said that they've seen for a longer time, and I think ectoplasm, to me, I go, but isn't that something that they made up in the 19th century with the Fox sisters and stuff? They just made that up then.
I know, that's what everyone thinks.
But they just made that. But if there's a line that you can follow, and I go, all right, in ancient Egypt, they were seeing ectoplasm. Then I start to go, yeah, that's more impressive to me. That's right. More impressive.
There is a line for the materialization of hands. And that's
Talk
why
about hands. Yeah.
When I lecture about this, that's what I tend to focus on.
Please tell us about it.
There's much weirder stuff, but I don't want people to have to deal with the weirder stuff. That's all.
No. Please. We want the weirdest possible stuff. Please.
Our audience, man, they can't get enough of
wants the weirdest possible stuff.
Okay.
I want the weirdest possible stuff.
I mean, and I'm a journalist. I like facts. So the way it works with Stewart and the hand is there's a table that's between him and somebody comes up and sits opposite this table. So let's say I'm called up to do that. And the Stewart is strapped to his chair. And there's a table that's between him and person on the other side, which is me. It's a round table. And the table is lit up underneath, so it's got a cloth over it. But there's a light that comes through it so you can see the surface of the table.
Okay.
And what happens is you're sitting up at this table and you'll start to see this dark substance come across the table from where Stewart is sitting. It's looks like water. It's alive. It's moving, and it's over the surface of the table, and it comes over the edge, and then it gets bigger and moves towards me. Let's say I'm the person doing this, and it takes up more and more space on the table. And then you start to see these sort of rudimentary digits kind of form, like a really weird beginnings of a hand, and then you see an actual 5-digit hand just sort of in this amorphous stuff. And then suddenly it becomes 3-dimensional. The hand lifts up in a fist, and then it bangs on the table to show you that it's 3-dimensional. And then this is the way that they normally do it. And then it recedes off the table. And then Walter, the spirit, will say, this is his line that he says to everyone, would you like to hold the hand of a man who has been dead to your world for 100 years? For over 100 years. And of course you go, yes, I would. So then,
that's just it. That's his line every time.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much, because lots of times it's a new person sitting there who's never even been to the seance. For the regular sittings, they don't do these things. They're more for people who visit or whatever. It's not like they got to do them over and over again. But anyway, so then what happens is the hand recedes, and then it'll start all over again. So you see the, after he asks if you want to hold his hand, you'll see the amorphous black, it's silhouetted. That's why it looks so dark. Wiggling over the table. And then you see the hand, the digits form again. And then you see this physical hand come up like this. And then he will tell you, that you'll come
touch
over
it.
and you'll hold it. I held that hand. You can feel, it feels exactly like a human. I mean, it's a human biological hand. And it's, the difference, what I remember about it, and it's been pretty consistent, is it's very large. Definitely, I have small hands, but it's a large hand. The skin it's very warm, and the skin is really, really soft, like a baby skin, like brand new skin, which I thought about later. Well, that's interesting.
That's weird.
It was just created.
It's creepy.
But anyway,
that's
you
weird.
can feel
that's very
all
creepy.
you can, it really isn't. You can feel all the knuckles, the fingernails, everything that's normal in a hand. And you just hold it for a while, and then the hand recedes off the table and it's gone. That's what happens.
Does it give you any pressure back or anything? Does it grip you in any way?
Yeah. It's
Really?
just as if you were holding your friend's hand. There's nothing different about it from a regular hand, except that it was very warm and soft.
You can trace this back to practices from hundreds of years ago?
Yeah, they're well documented and they're kind of easy to document in various mediums. And one of them, a Polish medium named Franek Kluski, was these scientists actually, I mean, this is, I wrote about it in my book. I talked about this at Rice.
Oh, that's a cool organization.
Rice University.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard about the Archives of the Impossible?
They're kind of a Fortean group.
Sounds fantastic.
I'd like Stephen to meet Jeffrey Kripal, who runs that.
We would like to meet Jeffrey Kripal. We would like to meet
awesome.
Jeffrey.
Stewart Alexander's, the medium I work with in the UK, his archives have all been given to Rice University. So they're at the Archives of the Impossible.
Amazing.
Which is cool. There are tapes of all his seances and all his journals and books because he wanted to have all this stuff delivered before he leaves this world, and because he never knows when that's going to happen.
The name alone is fantastic.
Kluski is the...
Back to Kluski. So he was a Polish medium. And he was like an intellectual, this brilliant guy. And he just had a few years of being a medium, and then he just didn't want to do it anymore. But he's one of the most extraordinary mediums ever because he had all these manifestations of creatures and beings in his seance room. But what the scientists did, it was Gillet and Richet, two well-known French investigators who had, documented many frauds. I mean, they knew what the hell they were doing. So under controlled conditions, they took Kluski into this lab room that had no windows, and they had the locks on the door and the whole thing, stripped his body. I don't know if they stripped him, but they checked his body, held his hands the whole time, the usual controls, and his legs. And so they brought in this hot wax into the room, a bowl of like really hot wax. And they asked these spirits to dip their hands into the wax. They would let the wax dry, very thin layer, it was like as thin as a piece of paper. And then they would dissolve the hands. They would dematerialize those hands so that you had a perfect wax glove.
Wow.
And they have like little wrists. There's no way that a hand could slide out of a glove like that.
Yeah.
There's no other way except dematerialization. And there were a lot of really interesting things, like the wax would dry ridiculously fast.
Interesting.
They could actually see this. They could see lights. They could see it. They could see it in the room. The wax was splattering all over the place.
This is fascinating.
This is super fascinating.
And one more detail. I mean, there's pictures if you have my book, there are pictures of some of these molds in there. So what they did was they took the glove, and a lot of them were imperfect and some of them broke, but there were some that were really gorgeous, and they would pour plaster inside of them once they dried and scrape the wax off. So they have a mold of these non-material hands that materialized for this one thing. Some of them are like this,
interlocked.
Nobody's seeing this. Fingers are interlocked.
Oh yeah.
So there's no way you could do that with a human hand in there. The other thing
is fingerprints?
They do have fingerprints, and some of them are also miniature. So that's another really evidential weird thing. Like
child's hands, baby hands, or
like child size. There's one that's like this there's one where the finger is pointing.
I gotta see this stuff.
Yeah, if you look in my book, there's pictures of it. And then
I've seen the picture. I've seen the pictures. But the
molds, they reside at this Institut Métapsychique International in Paris, which is where a lot of the investigators were from who did all these studies. And I was able to go there. It was like seeing a holy relic.
It's really cool.
Yeah, that's so cool.
They had them locked up in the dark in this vault. They don't even want them exposed to the light because they don't want them to become damaged. I was able to touch them and hold them and photograph them. And
what's funny is like when I hear this, like if I read that, like William Blake was doing this, I'd be like, William Blake's a genius. This is amazing.
That's interesting.
Well, when I hear you tell me this story, I think it's still a magic act. Somehow.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
This is something about me,
If you want to see how it happened, there's like this many pages of details
about him
by the experimenters, exactly how they did it day by day, every detail you want to know about how they controlled these experiments, who was present, what they did. Sometimes they put dye in the wax to make sure that, the wax was the same wax. They'd measure it before the sitting and after the sitting and see if the amount missing corresponded
Yeah.
to, you know,
Amazing.
they were just meticulous. And there's a lot of pictures of, you know, I mean, I know you guys, just pictures of
really
these.
cool. Yeah.
No, I believe that. I believe that there's all this data, but I think there's a sense in which I romanticize the historic versions of this. Like Plato thought like the soul lived before, and you could tell because you could do mathematics without learning it. Like he is this famous example in the Meno, and you go, well, Plato's a genius. Well, look how. But then if somebody tells me that now, I'm like, what's wrong with this person? They're a crank or a quack or something.
So because it has a historical lineage, or it has
I relate to that.
or it's imaginatively.
I think it's just we live in a different world now, Stephen. And it's like there's something about the ancients that's different.
You buy that there's some deeper connection to sort of this parallel reality than now, that we've lost the capacity to communicate between these worlds. I buy that entirely.
And then we haven't lost the capacity, but that our culture and our world is so infused with technology and iPhones, and I don't know, it's just not conducive.
No, that we've
it's not conducive to it.
No, not that we've lost the capacity, but that we've almost kind of forgotten we have the capacity or something.
There's something sacred. I mean, that I think Stephen was pointing to about the approach of the geniuses from the past. That just doesn't. It's different now.
You'll see it now in like the resurgence of psychedelic culture. So people will they'll take a substance like a psilocybin, or, you know, Paul and I have talked about this, and we talked to Matthew Johnson at Johns Hopkins. And so they'll have these, and this is maybe the near-death experience too. And then we will accept that psychedelic experiences are transformative, but we don't have it attached to this larger spiritual tradition.
It requires the vehicle of the psychedelic, though, to do it.
Yeah.
It's not like you can just sort of do it on your own, which is sort of the thing that makes it, But that's true.
I think the experiencers of that feel like it's the same thing as any kind of spiritual experience. To them, there's no difference. Yeah. But I always feel, well, if there's something external that's going into your body, maybe it doesn't quite count.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
But then they would argue that it
cheating.
does. Because it's still the brain that's involved.
I suppose there's some argument, too, that you might be inducing some chemical reaction in your brain. Maybe that's what these people are doing. Maybe that's what somebody like these mediums are able to do. Maybe they're inducing some sort of chemical reaction that's allowing them. Because I think about like I talk about the flotation tank that I do all the time, which, you know, and the kind of crazy psychic experiences you can have in that with nothing. I mean, there's no outside stimulus coming in at all. There's no LSD, and there's no light, and there's no sound. So that then the sort of crazy experiences that feel paranormal really kick in a really interesting way.
I didn't know about that.
Oh.
You do that regularly?
Yeah. I used to do it regularly. I haven't done it in a while, but I've thought about getting back into doing it again because I found it really sort of useful. I found it therapeutic physically. I felt so much better, you know, and I found it super psychically stimulating in a lot of ways.
That's interesting. I've never done it.
You should definitely do it because it's a kind of strange machine that kicks a lot of things in an interesting way.
You mean in your mind, like
in your mind, and physically it does stuff to you too. I mean, the sort of sense of physical relaxation from it is really intense. Do you feel like this stuff has benefited you? Do you feel like a positive benefit from your engagement with this stuff? You do.
Oh yeah, because I love it, and it just makes me in touch with another reality.
Yeah.
That it's really so much of what gives meaning to my life, I think.
Awesome.
I mean, it's been so long. I can't imagine not having it part of my life.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you all for joining us for this brief bonus wag. Until next time, wag on weirdos, right, Steve?
Wag on weirdos.
Correct.
Right. Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jeff Neal. Animation created by Alex Sokol. Research assistance by Aidan Brooks. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.